There's a story that I want to share with you. It's about Teddy Stoddard and Mrs. Thompson. Teddy was in 5th grade, and Mrs. Thompson was his teacher. And at the beginning of the school year, Mrs. Thompson said something to the kids that was a lie. She said, "I love all of you the same." But she knew that wasn't really true because Teddy, who sat in the front row, wore dirty, wrinkled clothes, didn't smell all that great, hair wasn't combed, and he wasn't paying much attention. And Mrs. Thompson knew that she didn't quite love Teddy the way she loved everyone else. So then, as the year went on, and it was time for her to do evaluations for the class, she looked back at the previous teacher's comments. And she saved Teddy's for last because she was dreading doing his. She read his 1st grade teacher's report and said, "Teddy is a bright, creative young boy, very pleasant, lots of manners, and has a ready smile all the time." 2nd grade, the teacher wrote, "Teddy is a wonderful little boy. He's very interested in learning, but he's having a little trouble because he just found out his mom has a terminal illness." 3rd grade teacher wrote that Teddy's having a rough time in school. He's not so interested in his studies. His life at home is really challenging because his mom passed away. 4th grade teacher wrote that Teddy doesn't pay attention in class. He doesn't do his homework. His family life is tough because his dad doesn't pay any attention to him, and he has no mom. At that point, the teacher, Mrs. Thompson, felt terrible because she had been enjoying giving Teddy red marks and bad grades because he wasn't doing his schoolwork. She was embarrassed of her behavior. And when Christmas came around and all the children brought a little gift and put it on her desk and they were wrapped so beautifully, Teddy's was wrapped in a crumbled brown paper bag. She opened Teddy's gift, and the kids snickered and laughed because in it was a rhinestone bracelet that was missing some of the rhinestones. But Mrs. Thompson put it on her wrist. And there was also a bottle of perfume in there that was only about a quarter of the way filled. And she sprayed the perfume on herself and made a fuss about how wonderful the gift was. And when Teddy left the classroom that afternoon when school was over, he thanked her for wearing the perfume because he said she smelled like his mom used to smell. Mrs. Thompson cried for a long time after that and decided then and there that she was not going to teach subjects anymore. She was going to teach children. And she started spending more time with Teddy, and she started giving him extra attention and extra love. And by the end of the school year, Teddy was a bright student at the top of his class and smiling and feeling loved and feeling special and feeling like he could do the work. At the end of 6th grade, Teddy put a note under Mrs. Thompson's door, and it said that he was doing well, but she was still his favorite teacher. Then she didn't hear from Teddy for about 6 years, and after 6 years, she got another note, and it said that he had just graduated from high school. He was a 3rd in his class, but she was still his favorite teacher. Another 4 years went by, and another note from Teddy. Mrs. Thompson read that he had graduated from college, but he wasn't done, and he was going to keep going with his studies, but she was still his favorite teacher. A few years later, she got another note saying that he was now a doctor, and she was his favorite teacher. Later that year, another letter came for her, and it said that he had met a girl and he was getting married. And his father had passed away a couple years before. He had no family. And he asked Mrs. Thompson if she would sit in the place where the mother of the groom sits at the church. She did. She wore that rhinestone bracelet. She wore the perfume. And after the ceremony, Teddy went up to her and told her that she was such an inspiration to her, that she made all the difference in his life. And she said, "Oh no, Teddy, you made the difference in my life. You were the inspiration to me, and without you, I never would have been the teacher that I became." It's a touching story. And I share that with you today because we're talking about inspiration. Inspiration is one of Columbine's core values. We've been sharing with you our core values that a group of Columbine members came together several years ago and decided what is important here at the Columbine community? What things do we value? And they came up with 5 different core values. Scott talked about the first 2, community and spirit-led, the last 2 weeks. Today we're talking about inspiration, and we still have authenticity and inclusiveness to discuss. But today is about inspiration. That group of Columbine members wrote about inspiration. We aspire to bring out the best in ourselves and in others. When we are inspired, we are in spirit. Inspiration supports spiritual growth, transformation, and empowerment. Inspiration, the root of the word inspiration means inspire, to breathe, to bring life, to give life. So we breathe in spirit. It's an inflow. The Revealing Word said it's an inflow of divine ideas. It's not something we can will. It's not something we can force to happen, but it happens when we're awake and when we're open to possibilities. We breathe in inspiration. It's a motivational response to some stimuli, either something outside of us. Maybe it's nature, maybe it's other people, maybe it's seeing the actions of some others, maybe it's just being out for a walk. Whatever it is for us, we get that aha, we get that revelation, and it inspires us. We breathe it in. We take it in. We let it enliven us. And then we use that inspiration to aspire to a new way of being, aspire to be the best we can be. We breathe out. From the inside out, aspiration, again, is that breath, but it's the breathing out. Breathing out. You know, many of the news stories that we're hearing today are anything but inspiring. Can be challenging. It seems to be no end in sight of COVID-19. No end in sight of this. We're having a heightened awareness of racial injustice. Eric Butterworth says this about inspiration. Inspiration, in terms of the inner flow, is always there and is always available. So regardless of what's going on in our outer world, regardless of pandemic, regardless of protests, and there is inspiration always. But sometimes we become so rooted and grounded in the circumference of life and in outer things that we're not listening, we're not receptive, and we're not responsive, and we're out of gear or out of synchronization. In other words, we're on autopilot. You can certainly feel that way during this pandemic when many days kind of blend together and seem the same. when life as we knew it is over, and we're all kind of existing in this new place. This is when it's really important to see differently, to look at things in a different way, to expand our level of awareness. And our theme this year is Seeing Through a Spiritual Lens, 2020 Perfect Vision. And I love that Unity World Headquarters has a subtopic for each month of the year during this theme. And the theme for July is play. It's perfect for inspiration, because what is play but it's an opportunity for us to take time out of our busyness, take time out of being serious, take time away from our work, and play. And let that be a joyful thing. Let it help us see in a new way, see through new eyes, bring new life to our lives, instead of being stuck in the doldrums of life. Life in us is constantly seeking to expand and to grow. And play allows us to do that. Play allows us to step back and be inspired. There's an ancient poem that roughly translated says, if you come to the end of your store and you have but one loaf of bread to sell that loaf of bread and buy some white hyacinths for your soul. Your soul's development is important, and it shouldn't be all work. There needs to be a level of fun, a level of play in our lives. Jesus referred to this when he said in Mark chapter 8, verse 36, for what has man profited if he gains the whole world and loses his own soul? In America, we work hard. We are driven. And when you talk to people from other countries, that's how they see us. Like not taking time out for leisure, not taking time out for play. Play is such an important thing in our lives. And we can use that to inspire us to see life in a new way, to see people in a new way. We can breathe it in and then breathe out what we aspire to be. I have a teacher who was very special to me in ministerial, actually, when I was taking classes for a licensed Unity teacher, Reverend Tom Thorpe. And a couple weeks ago, got a notice in the newsletter that Unity Worldwide Ministries sends out that he's retiring. And so I sent him an email and told him how much he inspired me, how listening to his stories helped me see that I too could be a Unity minister. He was raised Catholic like I was. And it brought a new life to this study that I was doing. I could be a minister. And so I aspired something more of myself. And he brought that out. He inspired me. I sent him that email, and he's quick on the response. With his emails, he sent me an email right back and says, Suzanne, you just made my week. And he made my week by saying that. It feels so good to let people know how much they mean to us, how they've inspired us, to let them know. It's that bringing out the best in ourselves and in others. Eric Butterworth goes on to say in this article on inspiration on truthunity.net, people may provide all sorts of beautiful experiences for you. But if you don't listen, if you don't see, if you don't take it into your own consciousness, nothing happens. So it's a commitment. It's something that involves an actual decision to turn aside and find a change of pace, a new way. And maybe that's a new way to play. What if that's all we needed to do was find a new way to play? What do you do to play? I want to invite you to write in the chat box if you're on Facebook with us right now. Just what do you do to step away and have fun? How does that help you see the world through new eyes? What do you do to play? You know, the science supports this, that play is important in allowing inspiration and choosing to be inspired, because our brains need to slow down to be inspired. We create new neural pathways when we learn something new, when we try something different, when we try a new form of play. A couple articles that I read said that we don't get inspired when we're focused and attentive and working hard. We get inspired when we step back from that. That's the time when our brains are open to new ways of being. When our brains are more plastic, they say. Plastic has a different meaning in this sense. When we're more plastic, we're more open to inspiration. It could be exercising. It could be going for a walk. It could be when we get away from the things that we do to stay focused and let our minds wander. Just let our minds wander. I had a new sense of play in my life a couple weeks ago. My husband Kevin and I were in Breckenridge, and Kevin just asked me if I would mind renting an e-bike and going for a bike ride around from Breckenridge to Frisco. I was kind of nervous. I'm not a big bike rider, but we rented these e-bikes, and we got to Frisco from Breckenridge, and it was fun. Really fun. You don't have to work as hard. You still have to work. But it's like somebody's giving you a little push. Inspiration is kind of like that. You get a little push. Something enlivens you. Well, we got to Frisco and decided we didn't want to just turn around and go back, so we went around Lake Dillon. And we got almost all the way around the lake when we got to a point where, we're on Swan Mountain Road, and it's 800 vertical down in 2 miles, and you share the bike lane. There's no bike path. You share the lane with the cars. Well, we turned around and went back to the trail map, and we were trying to look and find a different way to get back to Breckenridge. Well, the only thing we could find was to go back the way we came, to go all the way around another 6 miles around Lake Dillon to go back the way we came. Well, that wouldn't have been so bad, except when we looked at the sky over west towards Breckenridge, it was very dark, and the wind was coming in and blowing very strongly, so storms were coming in, and I did not want to get caught in the rain on a bike that I wasn't real comfortable with. So I gathered all my courage and said, let's go. Let's just go. Let's just do it. It's 2 miles. So we did. We got there, stopped before we had to stop before we got started again and look at it and like, okay, here we go. And we went down the 2 miles. I had the brakes on most of the time, going 17 miles an hour, going downhill. And it was fun. I don't know if I would do it again, but it was fun. And when we got down to the bottom, that sense of accomplishment, that sense of joy that I tried something new. And yeah, I was scared, but the aliveness in it, having the wind in your face and the going down, and it was a new experience of play for me. It was so much so that when we got home, we decided we started shopping for e-bikes and bought some e-bikes this week. So we have this new sense of play, Kevin and I, to do things together, to see in a different way. You know, I love to run and walk. I love doing that. But on a bike, you cover a lot more ground and you see a lot more things and you can go a lot farther. It's really fun to have this new sense of play. I'm inspired by people that face their fears and do something anyway, even though they're afraid. I'm inspired by people who take a stand for what they believe in and in a peaceful way stand up to things that don't make sense, that aren't right, that aren't loving, that don't treat people equally. I'm inspired by Martin Luther King Jr. and Gandhi and Nelson Mandela and all those that have stood up in spite of challenges. I'm inspired by the healthcare workers, the essential workers, those that are selflessly giving of themselves and serving others and helping other people during this pandemic. There are so many things and so many people that can inspire us even in this time. I'm inspired by Congressman John Lewis, who recently passed, for standing up for what he believed in for years. He said, "We must be headlights and not taillights. We must look forward and not look back." If I was looking back going down Swan Mountain Road, that wouldn't have been so good. You got to look forward. Look forward. Light the way for others with your headlight going forward. And there's a beautiful story in the Bible about going forward. It comes from the book of Ruth. Naomi was Ruth's mother-in-law. Naomi was married to a man, and they had 2 sons, and they lived in Bethlehem in ancient times. And there was a famine in Bethlehem, and so they moved to Moab. And after some time, Naomi's husband died, and her 2 sons, she was left there in Moab with their 2 sons, and they married Moab women. Well, some time went by again, and both sons passed away, and Naomi became embittered. And she decided she was going to move back to Bethlehem, so she told her 2 daughters-in-law to stay, go back to your families. Stay in Moab and go back to your families. Go back to the way you lived before you were married. Well, Ruth would have nothing of that. Ruth loved Naomi. Ruth decided that she was going to go with Naomi to Bethlehem, which metaphysically means house of living. You see, there's more living when we go forward than when we go back. And sometimes it can feel like we're taking 2 steps forward and 1 step back, and that's okay. We need to keep moving forward. And so Ruth moved with Naomi to Bethlehem. And they were struggling, having a hard time putting food on the table. And so Ruth went to work in the fields. And when she was in the fields, she met a man named Boaz. Now, Boaz fell madly in love with Ruth at first sight. And Naomi encouraged this relationship. Here's a man who will take care of us. They eventually got married. They had a son. And that son had a son whose name was Jesse, the father of King David. King David was an ancestor of Jesus. So you see how things unfold. It was a great love story between Ruth and Boaz. And things, as she let love guide her, she found love expanded with Boaz, expanded in her new life. And without her doing that, without her marrying Boaz, we wouldn't have had Jesse or David or maybe Jesus. It unfolded in a beautiful way. It's a beautiful love story, but it also has some things that we can look at that are happening currently. You see, there was a Mosaic law that Boaz was not allowed to marry outside his race, outside his religion. But he did it anyway. He let love guide him. In spite of the human barriers that wanted to keep them apart, they were inspired by their love to move forward, to go forward and let life unfold. How do we let love rule? How can we do that in our own lives when there's so much going on that can divide us and tear us apart? This is quite challenging. It can be quite challenging. There can seem to be no end to this pandemic. We're just getting started with it, I've read. And the racial inequalities that have been going on for years and years. We have this new heightened awareness of them. We need to keep moving forward, keep pushing forward. All of this reminds us that we have to live in the present moment. Don't be a taillight, be a headlight. Live in the present moment and let the times, the things that are going on in life be a blessing and a lesson and propel us, be inspirational to us, to have a motivational response that causes us to aspire to be better, to do better, to be the best we can be the best Christ we can be. This is following a path out of love and not fear. And sure, there'll be people who disagree with you. There'll be people who disagree with you, people who don't believe the way you believe. But don't let that stop you. Be inspired by the many people who have continued on this journey and taking a stand for their beliefs. It's a beautiful thing to witness, and it's a beautiful thing not to copy what someone else has done, but to aspire in our own way. What is ours to do? Have faith that there's a lesson and a blessing in what's going on in our world today. It just takes a little bit of faith. It just takes a little bit of potential, a little bit of possibility in our consciousness to expand and to make big difference in our world. I was driving west a couple weeks ago around 6 or 7 o'clock at night, and it was a cloudy night, and there was one little sliver of sunlight coming through. It was beautiful, but that one little sliver of sunlight was so bright. That's all it takes. That little sliver, that little glimmer of hope, of inspiration, of love, of potential. We take it in and we let it expand. Life is always wanting to expand in us, always wanting to evolve into more. So the question is, how do we stay alive as long as we live? Many people live and aren't alive. We want to be alive in our life. Inspiration gives us that aliveness. So I invite you to write in the chat box, what inspires you to live life more fully? How do you open yourself up to inspiration? Where do you find your inspiration? It may be different for all of you. But as you see other people writing in the chat box, maybe that's something you could try. Maybe there's a new form of play. Maybe it's time to buy some flowers, some hyacinths for your soul. Do something different. Get out of the box. Breathe in inspiration. Breathe out aspirations. Let love be your guide and aspire to be all you can be. So I want to invite you into a time of meditation now, into a time where we take this in, rest with our souls, with our divine essence, and listen to these words from Ruth, chapter 1, verse 16. Do not press me to leave you or to turn back from following you. Where you go, I will go. Where you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, and your God, my God. Let love guide you as Ruth did. Go where Spirit is guiding you to go. Be who Spirit is guiding you to be. And be open to all the life that is longing to spring forth from you. Let's take that into the silence for a few moments.